Ja, tere tulemast. Welcome to our second meeting in the series we called EstoFem, which explains everything, what you want to accomplish. We want to give a voice, so to say, give a voice to great Estonian women living here in Canada or elsewhere. Because what I found out, we have, like Vemo has huge archives, and there are lots of oral history also, like life story interviews recorded by the Eesti Kultuuripärandi Selts and all kind of materials. But the majority of the interviews are conducted with men. So we have to change that because we know there are really great women. And for me, it was kind of funny to, at one point I started thinking that I know what those great women have done for the community, Estonian community here. But for some, I had no idea what they did in their professional lives. And then I thought we have to record those, collect those stories as well, because it has been, as I've seen that many times here, especially for women, it has been sometimes very difficult to combine those two lives, like your Canadian professional life with this Estonian community life, if you wanted to be a great community member and bring your kids to the schools and scouts and guides and do all this stuff. So it has been really hard work for so many women. And we have more stories about their activities in the community and for the community, but not that many which tell the professional story. And especially nowadays, when people quite easily switch their career path. When I was young, then there was a habit, like you studied something, you started working, and a good person kept working at the same place forever, doing the same thing. And everyone thought, oh, he or she is a great specialist. Now the world really has changed, and to give the younger people also the opportunity to look into those very different worlds where we spend our professional lives. That series might be helpful, maybe to inspire or encourage some younger people as well. And we can see at least two younger people on the screen here today. So väga tore, et te olete siin. And I would have a very brief introduction to our great guests today, Kristi Allik and Elma Miller, because we will talk about your career in more details in our talk here. But you have so much common. You were both born in Toronto to Estonian parents, so you're kids of refugees. You both studied at U of T, music. Kristi continued at some other universities in Princeton and Southern California, where she got her master's and doctorate. You both studied at the great well-known composers, and you have some your teachers which you share. And then you both, of course, are writing music, and you have taught young people. Kristi was associate professor at Queen's University, but it's also interesting that you were the director of the electronic music studios and the computer laboratory of music applications at Queen's University.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm actually, my title is, I did get a professor, and my title is Professor Emeritus at this point.
Yes,
So
I know.
I'm afraid it needs to be updated, but sorry to interrupt, but I just thought I should say that.
Yeah, no worries. And you both won all kind of awards and prizes and worked on different interesting projects. And as said, we'll go more into detail with all of that and why I wanted to have both of you here together. It might take more time than talking to just one person, but as you have those parallel paths here in Canada, and I know you are pretty much friends, and you know each other for a long time. So I thought that the dialogue might be very interesting for us also to follow, to see those two maybe different perspectives, maybe similar ones. And we have prepared some questions. And we don't have to be very strict, like following those questions, so we can be pretty free, especially you when you start talking here. But we'd like to keep it in at least hour and a half, not to go over that because that might be too exhausting, maybe. And those people who want to ask questions, if you have any questions, you can first write them in the chat here. And when we open the floor after the talk, then you can ask like directly from Kristi or Elma. So first, to the background. How did you first come to the composition, and what drew you toward it as your main artistic language? Why composition? Kristi.
Do you want to start?
First?
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I've been around music all my life. I took piano lessons with a wonderful piano teacher in Toronto, Estonian piano teacher, Talvi Jaldre. Some of you might know her. A great inspiration. And then I went to University of Toronto. The was interesting thing was I had a well-known Canadian composer, Oscar Morowitz, for my theory teacher in first year. And he was very he liked my work. He thought I was a good musician, and he told us several times. He mentioned that he thinks I should go into composition. And the first few times he said that, I just kind of laughed at it. I thought, oh no, well, he's just saying that. But he kept insisting. He said, no, really, you should go into composition. So in second year in University of Toronto, that's when you had to choose your major. I decided, yes, I will go into composition, and I had him for my composition teacher in second year, and very supportive. I learned a great deal from him. Extraordinary person. I think Elma knows him very well too, and she can talk about it too. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. And third year, I had Lothar Klein, also a very good professor of composition. And then on fourth year, I had John Weinzweig, who's a very well-known Canadian composer. And all three of them, I thought, were very, very supportive of me and encouraged me to continue my studies. And so I think there were also some many Estonian support. Stella Gerson, I think, was one person who did a great deal. I think that being in Eesti Ühiskond, in Estonian society, was very, very significant sort of impetus for me to be in music and to stay in music.
Thank you, Kristi. Elma, to you.
In my case, I've also been haphazardly in music. My mother and I moved a lot, so every chance I had. But then there were streams in school where you had to take a test, and then, okay, now you are playing violin. So I played violin. Then we moved again, and I wanted an instrument because I lived far away from school, that I wanted a lighter instrument. And the teacher said, well, we're out of flutes. Now, what about clarinet? Light instrument, you'll like it. It's also very flexible. And that ended up being in Riverdale, and his name sounded really Estonian, Sulev, Ants Sulev. So but then again, I moved again in grade 10, and then but I stuck with clarinet. And I guess the first impetus to compose was when I was in the Estonian orchestra and really wanted more clarinet music. And Uno Koch said, well, there's a Virkaus clarinet concerto. There's one by Lüdig. And I thought, okay, let's do them. We didn't have all the instruments, but we figured it out. I mean, they could organize it. If we didn't have a bassoon, we didn't. We had a saxophone, we put it in. And the cadenzas were really boring. And, well, I knew that, well, composers did rewrite the cadenzas. And so I thought, well, I'm going to rewrite all the cadenza show-offs, do some really good stuff. And then Uno Gork was the one after the performance who had to deal with the composers. I didn't know they were famous or anything. I just thought, okay. And then Uno finally he said, "Well, Elma is a composer." And that was when I really didn't even know whether I was or wasn't. Then I entered university. And yes, I studied with Oscar Morowitz, but because I had pretty well studied on my own, I told Oscar that I really don't know what I'm doing. I was even shocked that I got this far, but he said, "Well, now that you're here, just go do extra work and you'll be fine. But you will see, you playing the clarinet, it will be your benefit." Then I also went into the two stream in second year. I mean, I managed it. And then my first teacher there was Walter Buczynski. And the first thing he said when he came into class was he looked at me and said, "So you made it." He was the entry professor for keyboard proficiency. And I don't want to go there with the story. It's ridiculous. It's very funny. Then I had John Beckwith. Then in fourth year, John Weinswijk. He was just a fantastic teacher. He would come up with these great exercises. Take three notes and let's do three, four, maybe six different openings. Just three notes. And that got the discipline into you're looking at music completely differently, how to do a different opening, how to grab somebody, how to smoothly go in. Each one of these were fantastic teachers. And Lothar Klein, I have to say, in my master's degree, we were combative. We argued over everything all the time. We'd hold the class would come to a halt. Okay, we're going to the percussion studio. You don't want congas in there. But you know, we were on good terms. It was just this struggle. That was, you know, that's what you do in university. You know, you make mistakes, you do something wrong, you do something right, you learn from your mistakes and you learn from other people's mistakes. It's a good place to be.
You already touched a little upon your Estonian heritage, but let's dig more into that. Like, how do you bridge those different identities, Estonian and Canadian one? And in what ways has your Estonian heritage influenced your musical thinking or artistic sensibilities, if at all? Or do you feel like you are in a dialogue between those kind of two worlds, even aesthetical worlds? Kristi.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that yes, basic answer is yes, it has influenced me profoundly. Um, First of all, my first emakeel is Estonian. I didn't speak English till I was 5 or 6, even though I lived in Canada. I was surrounded by Estonian people, and so it sort of became natural for me to speak Estonian and to absorb that Estonian culture without really thinking about it, but it was all around me, and I internalized it. And of course, my parents were obviously Estonian. We spoke eesti keel at home. I think that helped. We My parents were both very musical. They loved music. They didn't have a lot of money, like many refugees that came here. They had very little money at first, but whatever they had money, they would spend on going to concerts. And some of them were the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, but others were Estonian concerts. And my father was the organist at Van Andrese kirik, and so they had an amazing group of people there, including the minister Otmar Bello, who put on all kinds of musical concerts. And I remember once they even went as far as putting on the one of the last movement of a Wagner opera, and it was done in by piano, but actually literally it was the sorry the name escapes me right now, but yeah, we so they did one of the Wagner operas, and it was just a very, very musical environment to grow up in. I like most many Estonian young people in Toronto. I sang a lot. I was singing various choirs. I went to Eesti Kool. I went to camp. There was just so much music all around me. So I mean that had a tremendous influence in my life. When I became older, I really got interested in regilaul, Runoviisid. I did quite a bit of sort of background studies in that. Of course, one person that tremendously influenced me was Veljo Tormis and his work. I have the honor of meeting him when he came to Canada. It was a real experience. It was just wonderful. And the other person who's helped me a lot is Lena Thiesman. And some of you might know she has her own, she's part of an ensemble. If I lived in Toronto, I would have loved to have been part of that, but wasn't able to. So very definitely, regilaulud, runolaulud. I think just being so much around, having a father, we were constantly singing Estonian songs, singing in choir, singing by ourselves, playing the piano. I mean, it all had a very profound influence on me, the music at the church. So I don't know that I ever felt that there was I never felt conflicted really that I can think of. I was always feeling that I was able to, maybe at times the Estonian and the Canadian culture ran parallel to me. And yeah, I mean, from a purely cultural point of view, I mean, I always felt initially, I think as a kid, because I was Estonian, I always did feel different at school and my friends, and there was that aspect of it. But I think I eventually learned that it was a privilege. It was not something to be ashamed. It was not something to disparage. It was definitely something that I was proud of, and very much part of it. And I think I've always felt that I've wanted to continue in both streams. I think one thing that poses a challenge right now is living in Kingston. I have to be honest, I really miss Toronto. That's obviously it's a raising group. I miss the Estonian community. I was very fortunate about 15 years ago, thanks to people like Eva and other people. We started a Kingston Estonian group. And again, people like Eva have been very active in that, and we meet at least once a month. But we also keep in touch with newsletters, which again, Eva, thank you. I have to thank her. She's done an amazing job with the newsletters, having lunches and just in general keeping touch. And I think that still is influencing very much my cultural perspectives as well as how I write music and, as I say, that sort of dialogue, the constant dialogue between the dominant culture, of course, which is English and Canadian in Eesti keel.
I too started off in speaking Estonian, and but I lived in an Italian neighborhood, so nobody spoke English. So, but we played. My mother and I moved to Thunder Bay or Port Arthur then, and that was the Estonian community there. So I was in Estonian church, the Estonian choir, and they did skits. So everybody had to be in the skit. Whether you could sing or not, it didn't matter. You were in a skit. And that was a lot of fun. And I loved that. And then back to Toronto, I went to Estonian school, Estonian church, the Estonian Baptist church, where Kalju Raid was there. He was an interesting influence in that it wasn't music always done on paper. He extemporized. And then Asta Kaups would have something to read, and then the congregation had this response. So there was a kind of a new idea for me. And then, of course, I played clarinet everywhere. And at first, I resisted the Estonian influence. I didn't want to be called a folk musician, although I liked Pete Seeger, so it was a contradiction. So, and I liked, I watched TV, and I imitated everything on TV, everything. Big Mama Thornton, Elvis Presley, Jimmy Dean. I loved anybody with a good voice. So I imitated that, Ray Orbison. And in the Estonian community, I have no idea really what they thought of that, but I sort of ignored it and kept going. But it depends on the person who asks me for music. And so yeah, that sort of depended. If somebody was an Estonian, um, like Tiina Kiik, maybe, we were commissioned by the Lyra Borealis. Well, then I thought that I really should make an effort and think about some Estonian something to inject into the piece, subtly even, or uh, it depended, and it depended also on the person and the situation. I was very conscious about putting it in. In the electroacoustic studio, uh, the professor was worried about, sound sources. So I thought, after coming back from Stanford, where I had a digital studio to an analog, I thought, okay, now is the time to learn microphone technique and tape technique. And so I read an Estonian grocery list as the sound source. I mean, everyone thought it was exotic. So, but I didn't tell them. It was a grocery list. It was just, kartulat, porgandit, herring. I rolled the R's like crazy. They did not know. It was all weird to them. They never heard the Estonian language. And then I would play it backwards, forwards. I would take it apart, and then I would comment on it. So I had fun in the studio for the first time, I think, using the Estonian language in a weird way. So I don't know how to answer that question. I've only been to Estonia once in 2019, and that was an amazing experience. Coming off the plane, and people spoke Estonian everywhere. Signs were in Estonian. It was like a culture shock. And but it was a good experience because I understood everything. I was worried about that, and I got to meet other musicians, though not as many composers as I would have liked. But still, it was the first time, and you can't expect that much the first time.
Yeah, maybe at the end of our talk, we'll uh, talk more about the partnerships with Estonian musicians and things like that. But next, I'd like to ask about our kind of one of our main topics for today is like women or female composers in music. So when you began your careers, what was the landscape like for a woman composer in Canada? Did you ever feel that your gender shaped how your work was received or how opportunities were distributed?
Oh, yeah. I think that well, when I first got a composer, it was, and I suspect Elma, well, she probably have similar experience. I was the only one in my class. I believe at that time only one person, undergraduate, had graduated in composition before me. I believe that was Heather Spry.
That's right. Yeah.
Norma Beecroft, but she was in conservatory. She had also, but she was a lot older than both of us. So it was very unusual, and it was very typical for me, at least when I went to class. It was composition. I was the only woman in my composition class. I was the only woman in my electronic music class. I was only the woman in my orchestration class, and so on, so on. So yeah, it was very, very unusual in those days. You went to a concert and it was very unlikely there to even be a piece of music by a woman composer on your typical concert. Um, I think that even ironically, I think even when I started teaching, I have specialty of electroacoustic music. Typically, I walk into a class of maybe 30 students, and I'd be the only female, and I'd be the one teaching the course. And of course that felt very strange at first, but after a while I said, well, just you deal with it. And eventually of course, the ratios did become better. I don't know what they are right now. I think it depends on the university, depends on the country. Um, I think that, to be honest, I was given a great deal of support. I think for the most part, I didn't feel that I was discriminated against. There were some funny things that when I would apply for a grant and I'd get something back from the Canada Council, usually I see Mr. Kristi Allik, so they just never kind of figured out that I was a woman often. But I'd say, oh yeah, and the other funny thing that happened was when I got my first teaching a job at Western University, I got a call from this really nice lady, and I didn't know what first she was calling about. She was just very nice, and she'd heard that I was coming to Kingston, but she was from the Faculty Wives Association. And again, because I was a woman, she assumed I was not on faculty. She assumed that I was a wife of a faculty, and she was inviting me to all their events. And so, of course, when I finally explained to her that I was actually on the faculty and not a faculty wife, she was embarrassed, and then said, "Well, you can come anyway if you want." But it was, I think, one of those things again. But these were, I thought, very honest mistakes. I didn't feel they were necessarily discriminating, but more just sort of the attitude of the times.
That's true. Same thing happened to me. I was always the only woman in the composition class, the only one in the sometimes in harmony, maybe one woman. This is in 4 years. There were just no one else. Heather, I knew Heather vaguely because she was in she played the Carillon, and then there really wasn't anybody else. I heard about women composers off recordings when I was in the library, and then it would be Grazina Butcevich. And I thought, wow, just have to listen to that. And then there were other composers I'd never heard of. And well, I had to listen to them. I was very curious. And yes, funny incidences happened to me too. When I went to Stanford in the CCRMA, I was put into the men's wing. And I thought, why is it so far away to the women's bathroom? I thought. And so then they wondered, what am I doing there? I said, I'm in the course. You're in the course. And yeah, we have to get up at 4 in the morning. And so I'd like to be, in the women's ring. And so they were really surprised. They said, this is a highly mathematical course. I said, well, I haven't taken it yet. I'll find out, and can I change my room? Yeah, it was really funny. It was not intentional. They thought Elma was a Turkish name. And I guess I said, well, I am not a man, I'll tell you that for sure. And of course, I was the only woman in the course. And they all thought, where's your boyfriend? But but they were really great. I mean, they were fantastic. They all had a great sense of humor, and there were just a few times. Later on, I noticed when I graduated, the Canada Council had a blind jury where they wanted to have the names of the composers blocked out. So the jury would only be evaluating the compositions based on the music that was in front of them. No titles even, just the music. And that was the year that I got my first orchestral commission. And the Canada Council was pretty pleased. The jury was very happy. Found out later on that Norma Breatcroft was on that jury. And so that was really amazing. It was considered a young composer getting an orchestral commission. It was the Saskatoon Symphony. And but some people weren't happy. They thought it was unfair, but they couldn't argue the results. There were more younger composers that floated to the top, and and one woman. That was so it's hard to put a finger on it and say that that's, discrimination when they did a blind jury. It was just a matter of trying to be fair and trying it out, and it's an experiment. So those have been my experiences. And of course, there are more women now. There's a women's organization. There are more women visible, more women in programs. But in the decision-making process of doing programming, in my opinion, still not that many women. I still think that there's an area where, in the decision-making process of putting composers' names on programs, hiring musicians, I think that it needs work in that area.
Mm. No man, or in our case, no woman is an island. So we all belong to some networks, groups, organizations. Let's talk about that. Were there mentors or networks that played a key role in your development as a composer? And how important has collaboration with other female composers or artists been in your career?
Well, there weren't any. Um, the the women compose when I was a student there was no Women Composers Association. The Canadian Music Center had maybe, if I remember the statistics, was less than 10% were women composer members. The Canadian League of Composers, I don't know but I got the best support, I thought, from my sorority, Eesti Naisüliõpilaste Selts, translated the Estonian Women's University Association. Not sure if that's the official translation, but close enough. And it didn't matter that they weren't composers or musicians. It was just kind of wanting to know what other women are in their own respective professions, whether they were librarians, scientists, in performers, artists, visual artists, literary artists, in politics. It just to be in a group with other women pursuing professional careers. I thought that was enough.
Yeah, and I didn't mean just like female network or like women networks. I meant like all kind of networks or organizations. But yeah, Kristi, to you.
Um, well, I think in terms of mentors, again, I would definitely include my piano teacher, Talvi Jaldre, who just went way above and beyond what she could to nourish me and encourage me. I think another one again would be Stella Gerson, who helped me multiple times in so many different ways. I'm just very grateful for her. Um, I think NOS, yeah. I mean, just having the support system there that was very important for me too. Um, I mean, there are professional societies, and they've certainly been helpful. The Canadian League of Composers, which is the Canadian sort of the group that you belong to if you're a classical composer in Canada, and they certainly provide a network. The other one is, of course, the Canadian Music Center, again, been very helpful, and provides, well, Elma can probably even say more than, but they provide the score service for making and um, cataloging and archiving your scores, which is very important as a composer. But there's so many other things they do as well. There's so many other support systems, and they have, they help you produce CDs and things like that. So those networks, and for me, the other one is the Canadian Electroacoustic Community, which is
Yeah.
the electronic music society, not only of Canada, but pretty much now it's been all over the world. Just really, really great people, much appreciated. Um, I think that Queen's University has been really good to me. I feel that, they've given me a lot of um, financial support above just beyond my salary. The interesting about being a university faculty is, you are really expected to bring in the money, and so and that actually works pretty well if you're in the sciences, for example, and things like that. And yes, I did get some external grants, but the amounts of money that I, as a composer, would bring into the university be a few $1,000s versus, someone who's in the sciences would bring in millions of dollars. So I think I'm just grateful that the university has been good. And they often, there'd be certain university grants that I would get from them. So I think, well, it almost got turned around off in 180 degrees. Instead of me bringing in the money to help them, they would give me money. So I'm very grateful to them. And like I say, as an emeritus professor, I'm trying to do what I can now to, in a sense, give back a bit to the university, and so I'm serving on some committees still and stuff like that. I don't know. I think that's about it. That I can think of. Well, there was there's Soundscape. If you want to, we haven't really been active in it for a while, but I think the Soundscape people are very good too. I think for me, the Indigenous community has been a big benefactor as well. I've been working with a Anishinaabe women's drum circle, and again, the support goes both ways, but I've helped them produce four CDs, with some of my music on it as well as theirs, of course, and just in general, sort of on many levels. They've in a sense adopted me. There's another sharing group that's also adopted me. So I feel, as a sister and a grandmother from the adoptive sense, I feel that that's been a tremendous emotional as well as creative support for me.
Well, I would be remiss if I also didn't mention that instead of institutional support, I invented my own support by starting a concert series. With the artists that were in Hamilton. I collaborated with the Hamilton Artists Inc. and we started Art Sound. So the name already gives it an idea of art and sound. So that worked for 3 years. All the people that we pooled our audience. I learned a lot from that. Also, how to write grants, program, all of the necessary components, and I made a lot of friends. A lot of very great people, supportive team. And then the grants sort of dried up for Art Sound, and I thought I can go on my own now. The audience was growing, and so I gathered the people around me. There was Claire, her entire family, Carl, the kids, Audu, my husband being a nuclear physicist. He was an incredible fundraiser. He would go through Westdale. He beat everybody for business support, advertising in our newsletter. And Music Here and Now was born with a great team of people. We got grants, and I started looking for performers before they got famous. It's cheaper. And we did great concerts for about 10 years, 5 concerts a year. If you're a Hamilton composer, you were on my series. And if you were in Hamilton writing about music, you better write about my series. And they did. They did previews, reviews. I made sure this critic had a comfortable seat. He had a bad back. And and it didn't, the programming, I never compromised on that. It was all Canadian with some foreign content. We did the North American premiere by Peter Maxwell Davies. It's just unbelievable some of the stuff I was able to pull off. But without the team that I had, I just one person is not enough. But so my support came from the community. I cultivated an audience. We We listened to a lot of music, the audience feedback. Everyone got to meet everybody at the end. I baked cookies, cakes, coffee was from local businesses. It was an experiment. But then you get a composer like Udo Kasemets, where Gordon Monahan said, "Oh, he never shows up." We had an entire evening of his music, and I thought he's not going to show up. It's an insult. And sure enough, just when it started, I saw the door open, and there he was. He said, "Seniors rates." I said, "No, composers rates. Come in. You're late. Sit down. Be quiet." And later on, it was a big audience surprise that everyone, there were even Estonians there, which dollar per seat, just show up. And they did. I was surprised. And then the big surprise was Udo was there, and they got to meet him, talk to him. He's a normal person. It was a big thing actually to in that in that milieu that so my support came in a completely different way, and I yeah, I know it's a little bit eccentric, but I loved every minute of it until I sort of burned out in 1992 or so, and we moved to Burlington, which was almost like a desert, but then I started went and moved into music graphics and notation and CEC. I forgot about that. Kevin Austin came, and when he heard that I was going to buy a computer, he said, "You want to talk about it?" CEC meeting. I thought, but I don't have it. Don't worry, just tell us what you're going to buy, you know. That's good enough. We want to know what you're getting, what software. Talk about it. So on my old Underwood, I did the talk to say on what I bought. So that was, a little unexpected, but very supportive group.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like creative people even know how to create their own networks or support groups. If you don't have any, create one. Good idea. Everyone can do that. Just bring people together, like-minded people. But you were really both are very distinct musical, you both have very distinct musical language. And I'd like to talk more about your artistic language and also the process, how you create your music or where your music comes from. How would you describe your compositional voice yourself, Kristi? Do you tend to begin with sound, concept, structure, or something else entirely?
I think I'd consider myself a fairly eclectic composer because of my background. So yes, I have the Eesti influence for sure. Yeah, as I said, not only Regilaul, but I think it's sort of a more internalized source there that's part of my musical language. I've done quite a bit of jazz, so definitely you'll hear the jazz ensembles, jazz sort of background there. Certainly the classical, I like most good people. I was a musician. I was brought up on Bach and Beethoven, Mozart, and so I mean, there's undoubtedly a lot of that still there. So that's all become part of my language. It's hard for me to describe in terms of what exactly why, I wouldn't say, for instance, I'm minimalist. I think some of the minimalists, like many composers of this era, I mean, I undoubtedly Philip Glass has had some influence on me, um, but I think it's hard for me to sort of typify my language. I mean, it has changed over the years. I think when I started, I was much more atonal, and I think it was part of the mandatory requirement at the time at U of T that you weren't allowed to compose tonally. And I remember my first teacher, Oscar Morowitz, teasing me for years. He said the first piece I ever submitted to him was all in A minor. It was like a 10-minute piece, and he thought that was hilarious. Well, of course, later on, it was not that unusual for people to do things like that. And so I'd say that my music has become probably more tonal over the years. I mean, obviously, one of my big influences was electroacoustic music, and I think one of the reasons I got involved in electronic music was because I really felt that there was much more of a breadth and depth of possibilities, musical possibilities. I became very interested in timbral and sound design. So it's not only, putting all of the pitches down, but I really was interested in the sound. So the sounds themselves shape my music, not only in terms of the sonorities, but also in terms of the overall form. And so I've been doing more work in that area. I was very interested for a while in live electronic music. I don't know if anybody here has worked with things like Max and MSP. That would be one of my choices that I used to create live. So I had, which was an interesting combination of my jazz background, but also my electronic music background. I did for a number of years. I played in a electroacoustic music, and it it's interesting. Sometimes it was really just experimental avant-garde music, because of some of the members in the band. I suppose again, a fair sort of jazz influence perhaps, and at the end what we did was we improvised. We didn't play other people's music. We improvised primarily, and we called ourselves Lurk, Leark. A live electroacoustic kitchen was the name of our group, and we did quite a number of performances and recordings, and we did a couple of CDs, and it was really nice to be part of that ensemble, and that probably was part of my life for probably close to 10 years. We had that going at Queen's, and yeah, so that was a very important part. I have composed orchestral works. I've composed chamber ensemble works. I've composed solo works. I'd say one of the places where I feel really comfortable is if I combine regular instruments, like a guitar, for instance, with electronic music, either live electroacoustic or combination of pre-recorded electroacoustic with guitar music, for example, or violin music or vocals. And I really, really enjoy blending so that takes sort of combines my classical abilities with music abilities with electronic music abilities, and I enjoy that. I've also done some unusual work with non-Western instruments, and one of the main things I've done is with veena, an Indian instrument. If people know sitar, veena is somewhat similar. It's a stringed instrument similar to a sitar. And I worked for a number of years with a very good veena player at Queen's, excellent veena player who sadly has passed away now, but she and I wrote a number of pieces together and collaborated on them. And one of them was actually performed by the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. So, it's I think my musical style and sort of musical path has always been very multifaceted. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop there for now, but yeah.
Yeah, one more question to Kristi before we turn to Elma. Kristi, explain us what is soundscape?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me about that. So one of the interests is what I call soundscape soundscape studies, and that essentially means using soundscape is essentially there's many facets to it. It can be purely research oriented, where you will record and talk about sounds from purely a theoretical perspective. And one of the earliest people there was a project it started with Murray Schafer, a well-known Canadian composer, and Barry Truax, who did a soundscape project in the Vancouver area. What they did was for a certain a certain amount of time, and one of them was done anything from 24 hours to 36 hours to a week in duration. They would record everything in the environment. And they would use it they would analyze it. It could be used to figure out what sort of sounds are available in the landscape. It could be used even for scientific purposes. It could be used for health purposes. But it was mainly an analysis of the sound itself, and how that can be used in a theoretical and scientific context. So the other option of it would be to use the sounds once you've recorded them as in a creative context, and you would actually make musical compositions using the sound.
pretty much like you would any other music. So you could use this. Now, the difference, of course, is soundscape sounds are not necessarily pitch. They don't have pitch or music or melody. They're sound. So you're creating a composition, a music composition using the environmental sounds around you. And I've certainly done a number of recordings with that as well.
I
Hey,
remember Hildegard Westerkamp,
Yes.
her sound walks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that really. She did a
Yes.
piece in Oakville where you put on
Mhm.
the earphones and you just go for a walk through the estate.
Yeah.
And she would be talking, and then you'd be listening as well as listening to her. It was really interesting.
Hmm.
It was a
Hmm.
kind of a
Yeah.
Gesamtmusik experience.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
Soundwalks is a big part. Her and Andy McCartney, as well as
yes,
Aaron
yes,
Copland, and of
yep.
course other people like Barry Truax, and a number of people have done Soundwalks. And as Elma was saying, what you basically do is you just walk. You instead of the landscape coming or to you, in a sense, you go into the landscape, the sonic landscape yourself, and experience it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I found those interesting. But my music was, you were right, when we were at U of T, my first years after U of T was I would start off totally atonal, and then my humor would, I would just can't take it anymore, and the piece would morph into a waltz, or it would then go into chaos, semitonal, and then it would be a polka. I just found it, I couldn't resist it, and my humor was pointed out over and over again. Well, we all know Elma's piece. Can we tell the difference between anybody else? And but I used sound. It depended again on the instrument. The One of the interesting commissions was music for left-handed clarinet. Now, there were 10 composers who were asked to do this. And Rebecca Denard said, well, it's great, but only one composer in the group was going to be able to do that one. I thought, okay. So I got that commission, and she just, and it's, you sort of look at how many notes can the left-hand clarinet play. So you remove the bottom end, so there's no cheating. You still have to hold it up somehow. You can. But it's you look at the fact that also there's the parameter of doing it for a intermediate performer. So that's harder. I mean, I could, blast away a professional clarinet player could probably go an octave higher than what I limited myself to. So those are now I'm looking at you do have to have some grasp of something for this performer to rehearse day after day to get the piece. And so I combine it with tonality, also what's unique and idiomatic to the instrument. And I've noticed over the years I have gone more tonal, but not too much. I also like having controlled chaos,
Hmm.
but doing it virtually with I don't have access to a studio. So I do it one piece I did it with voices. So you have a cocktail effect. And then out of the cocktail effect, you have one voice. And so I like getting that, trying that out. I did that more than once to see how much effectiveness. I think the last piece I did, the Oracle work for 16 voices, I think that was better than the previous one. I was getting the hang of it. And it it's I don't know where my voice. I tend to be more theatrical. In the last piece I've written, which was about 8 years ago, because I was sort of not in the mood recently. It's a combination of talking, silence, and using the instruments as a landscape, and then building layers on it with the vocal line being a stream and a connecting stream, but then the stream phrase. So I'm working on that, and so it's a little bit of a new direction, but using some of the familiar techniques I've already built on. But I'm still experimenting and going into new directions. So, hard to say. COVID made a big difference too, psychologically.
Yeah, for me too. I think COVID was a big factor in how I thought about music and also, where to direct the music, because all of a sudden, um, you know, a lot of the previous structure was gone. I wrote an orchestral work and I couldn't get it performed because I think three orchestras were interested in playing, they all folded thanks to COVID.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
Kitchener-Waterloo. Yeah.
you really had to rethink where you're going.
Yeah, so I ended up doing engraving. When when the Professor Keeler came along with a pile of music, she said, "Well, since you're not working on anything, what about this?" Well, I didn't expect the pile I got. So it was a matter of constructing scores from parts. And so when I thought if there's a part missing, she said, "Well, you're a composer, fill it in." So the key thing is you're trying to compose in the style of that composer. So not too much Miller, but more Wagenseil or more Honauer. So that was the thing. But that's been my work for the last 8 years, and it's been interesting in a different way because I'm working in it. I've worked in 10 centuries. This is an interesting area where I haven't really concentrated in. If it's usually world premieres, you have a conductor to worry about. Louis Riel, where I had to reconstruct some parts that were hard. It would, and oh, I remember Robin Engelman, where the octopus percussion part. Now, he was a fantastic help. What do you do when you have this huge percussion section? How do you know who plays what? And then he showed me how he did it. He was a part of the world premiere, and he said, "Well, you take this instrument, you play it all the way through and see how far you get. Then you get the next instrument, and then the next, you just go and do it all the way through the opera. It's a 2-hour opera, and you can't have that many people in the pit. So we had to consider instruments, traffic patterns, and what's really practical." And so that was a huge learning experience. I mean, I've been in the business for 50 years, but that was a new experience for me. It was just fantastic. We laughed so hard too. But yeah, so that's a part of my composition too. I had pretty scores in the past showing off all sorts of stuff, and I like that too. iMusic.
Elma, talking about this music engraving, it's really interesting role for you to be like part of the music, right? So, how visible or hidden is your role as this music engraver? And how do you come to terms with that role?
Well, it was interesting. When I started, Henry Mutzers at the Canadian Music Center said I had good handwriting. Do you want a job? This was in the mid 70s. And I needed the money, and I thought, sure, let's try it out. And so these were opera singers that needed to have the arias up a little on a good day, down a little, so I was kept busy. And I liked working on my own. And I had my pens, and then I developed into better and more. And I tended to get the really difficult scores. Like I'll never forget working for Sarabji. I mean, that was a nightmare. There were just like 1,000 ants crawling across the sheets, handmade paper. So what is this? But I figured it out. You just sort of apply and work it through. And it was very, I just wondered how they would play this, but that wasn't my job. My job was to make sure it's legible enough to play. And it's, yeah, some composers included my name, and some didn't want to. They wanted an edge. If if they could get their music out faster, then you don't want to tell anybody else. And it would, and I got into trouble too because, well, I'm not going to be sitting around for this guy to get a commission. I mean, so that was the thing. I needed to keep on working. This is my job. This is not just the pretty face. They're doing all the work. So then I wondered about the credit. It is difficult until I started working in the 18th century, where on some editions you would say the published by composer, engraved by Madame Ogre, right on the front page. So people telling me that they don't need to give any credit to the person who did the engraving. Well, I've got news. You're wrong. I've proof. More than one. So Madame Olger was one of the famous engravers in the 1700s. She was married to her husband, who was also an engraver when he died. She continued. So it's very interesting seeing her work. You get inside the mind of the engraver, page turns, page layout, notation. It very interesting. I found that again different than working on the John Weinswijk book. I mean, there was graphics galore. And I remember when the book was promoted, there was one real show-off page where it's handwritten on one, and then my computer, we blew it up to 4 feet by 3 feet, and people could just count everything. But that wasn't the point. The point is it had to be published in a book. I actually liked the look of the handwritten score. It was beautiful. Why would I have to do the digital? But um, but but both John Weinswijk and Henry Mutzers bemoaned the fact Elma is now all on computer, the end of handwritten scores. So it I have to say, if it's in the composer's hand, I really like that. It's like the score, like Gail Young's music with her two instruments. It's a different notation. I mean, but you remember playing Gail's two phenomenal instruments that she had in Innes Hall last year. It's different notation. I did those two. That was all by hand, and it's it's the credit I wish I had, but I'm not going to argue if I get sometimes paid more than the composer. I mean, he changes style on me in the middle of the piece. It's not going to be the same rate. And if I'm working 18-hour days and they're going to now start haggling when they've already had the premiere, well, I don't really like that. And yeah, it's a struggle. But if you want your parts done, you're going to have to now think about doing it yourself. If I'm under contract and I'm not available. And I've worked for estates where you have to be honest. The composer is dead. You have to help the estate out as much as you can. And I did pass on work like that to Daniel Foley, and I'm still very sorry that he died last year because I wouldn't pass work like that on to someone I didn't trust. And I didn't care what kind of software he used. It's good software, but it's the nature of the business too. Some composers did not want a woman handling their music. That's how I started. I used my father's name. Still got it done. I mean, they don't know what's a woman's handwriting or a male handwriting. But when the check came, that's when that's where I started my business, and Audu then took over looking after the taxes and the billing, so that it was men like dealing with men. So I thought, fine, go ahead. But yeah, you get a reputation too. You can't buy a good reputation. It takes years of work, success, and building trust.
Yeah, I think that's the world which is like pretty closed for most of us here who are not like musicians themselves. It has been really very, very interesting, Elma. Thank you. But let's go to the big world now. You are very well connected in this Canadian contemporary music scene, obviously. But what are your connections or collaborations with, let's say, Europe and also Estonia? I know that your pieces were played just at Tallinn's Eesti Muusika uh, päevad, right, in April. So tell us more about your collaborations with like musicians all over the world, and especially in Estonia.
Should I start?
Yes, please.
I think I'm very lucky that about a year ago now, yeah, I guess it's been a year now. I was commissioned by the Eesti Elektronilline Ensemble, EMA, as they're called, and they asked me to write a piece for the last year's Eesti Muusikapäevad. And it was wonderful. I mean, they're an amazing, there's sort of an intersection between them and the Ensemble U, which is the one that performed both the Elmas and my piece this year. But the Emma is a special, its own ensemble, and I was just really amazed. They took the time, to get the commission for me, and then so because my husband's health is not that good, and I warned them that I may not be able to come there in person. So we decided we would do the collaboration over online, and it worked surprisingly well. I was able to give them my scores and my sounds. I had a whole library of sounds that I wanted them to use, so that was given to them. And then we used various real-time audio programs so I could hear them live. They was live streamed from Estonia to here, and vice versa. And then we collaborated probably at least once a week, and I was able to online attend the rehearsals, and then we were able to modify the score, and and they're such an excellent ensemble too. They're very comfortable in a number of different types of music. Um, and um, and so I was able to attend the premiere last year, and um, so I was able to attend the rehearsals, and it all worked out really well. I mean, I was delighted. I was honored. I was delighted to be there. I I've been, I think both Elma and I are good friends with him, and I sadly, again, because of health reasons, my husband's, I was not able to attend the concert in Innes Hall, but I really, really am so grateful for that opportunity. And when I was there, they also, I had an interview with Classic Radio, which was very nice, and again, very supportive, just wonderful. I also have been apparently, I don't know if it's come out or yet or not, but they're one of their main magazines. Is it just, I think it's just called Musica. Does that sound
Yeah,
familiar?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's apparently an interview with them, and I think I've just been so well taken care of by them, and I'm just very grateful. And I hope, I'm just grateful that Elma was able to at least accommodate them, invite them here, and organize a concert here. And I'm very grateful for that. And maybe one day we can do the same. Elma and I don't know if we should talk about it yet, but we've been thinking of a possibility of having a concert of with some of these people coming to Toronto, perhaps when the Geskus has been finished as part of their more broad-based inaugural concert series, we could perhaps do that. And I think we both would like to be focused more on women composers, perhaps Estonian women composers. So, but it's very much in the early planning stages. So I don't want to, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say too much about it, but that's certainly a possibility in the future. We'd like to do that. I think a lot of my work has happened in Europe and the Ars Electronica Festival. Some of you may know in
Oh, I've forgotten all of them. Where I've been Ars Electronic many years. Also, a number of awards from them. The Bourges Electroacoustic Music Festival. Again, many times I've been there in France. I've been to the ISCM. Was it ICMC? That's the International. Sorry, ISCM, International Society of Contemporary Music.
Mhm.
A number of my pieces have been done there. Also the ICMC, which is the Computer Music Conference, a number of times there. So I would say, I've had pieces done in many countries in Europe, in South America, in Japan, United States, Canada, and so on, and so on. So yes, to answer your question, there's been a wide sort of breadth of my music being done uh, in many parts of the world.
Elma.
I haven't collaborated with anyone, but yeah, I've had music in different parts of the world. In fact, Udok Azemet, just recently done in Eesti, was done in an ashram in India. It was not quite what I expected, but the guru wanted something different. And one of the GEMS performers who went annually to an ashram, I don't remember the name of the guru, but they wanted to bring this music. And so there, the exam, the whole point of the exercise was to sit there quietly and not react. Well, that with my music, that's sort of hard. But anyway, the guru himself fell over laughing. That was just so totally out of character. Everybody didn't know what to do. So that was an interesting experience, hearing all about what happened. That was not what laughed at when I went to Montreal and they played that music. The Udok was done in a private girls' school where three women in tight leather showed up on stage and with motorcycles. This is a private school, nuns. I just thought, wouldn't you get in trouble? No, it was they just loved doing it. They just wanted to know what does the composer mind. I said, no, I'm just dying to go. But then there was a snowstorm, I couldn't do it. But yeah, it's I've had my music sort of talked about. The works it been in performed in the States in unusual situations in Istanbul. The pianist picked composers, women composers especially, who had written about the Middle East. And my Kivialdjate Halet was based on the discovery of the meaning of cuneiform, which is on the cover. That was also played for Lennart Meri and by Elaine Keeler. But from that, I started a new piece called Tebe Valge, and that I played for Eesti Üliõpilasselts, but didn't follow my own score. I got lost a little bit. Page fell off the piano, but I thought, just keep going, try to act cool. But the music language then was more using the piano as a sound instrument rather than playing. I would be inside the piano, outside the piano, all over the piano. It's I enjoyed myself actually, and it the the humor aspect of it also comes in when you have children come to a modern music concert. And that was Jan Roos, who took his three kids to a concert in Toronto. And then he was worried that if the kids laugh in the middle of the concert, would that be a problem? He said, don't worry, we'll manage. And so it's these experiences that you bring children also to these concerts, which I think is really important. All three children will never forget that. I don't know what they remember exactly. They all have different memories, but what's important is that they were there. They experienced it. They got to talk to me later, and um, I think that's also really important. The audience being younger. So that's, yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what happens next year.
Yeah, I have two last questions to both of you. And the first one is, what kinds of musical questions still feel unresolved or open for you?
Wow. What sort of musical questions are unresolved, which we haven't
Yeah.
I think I can best maybe answer that with the piece I'm working on right now. I'm working with my husband Robert Mulder, and we've been working on this piece for, well, we're not the only one we've worked on, but close to 10 years. It's a multimedia piece, and we call it Viriditas. And we're still not, it's gone through so many transformations. And there is a version of it. We call it the cell phone version right now on actually on YouTube and on Vimeo. We've had parts of it done in live performance, and I can see it's sort of really open-ended. It's become it's hard to explain it because it really combines what people ask. Well, what is it about? Viriditas is about it's a word coined by um, a medieval woman abbotess, composer, poet, physician, scientist. Her name is Hildegard von Bingen, and I think some of you might know who she is. And she was an amazing woman because she started her own convent at a time when that just wasn't done. And she came up with the word called viriditas, which is actually means the greening of the world, and it ties in, with the environmental aspects, which I've been very interested in, the feminist and the feminine aspects of it. It ties in, I think to some extent with the indigenous world, and we're pairing that with Claude Monet, painter Claude Monet, which has been an inspiration put with both me and Robert. And you say, well, very different. Well, what do they have in common? What the three of us have in common, or the four of us? Well, it's the garden. Claude
Yeah.
Monet was known for his amazing garden. The Hilda Gunbringen had an excellent garden. It was for hers. It was a very medicinal garden. Well, Monet's was, I think, largely there for their his own artwork to create his own artwork from his garden. And our garden is really a combination of things. I'd like to say, if you say, what's your garden? We don't have a lawn. We have just plants in our backyard, in our front yard. And what's the reason for the plants? Well, it's there for the bumblebees and for the butterflies and for the birds. And so what we grow in our gardens are that particular type of plant that's going to be appealing and help. Now, some of you may know that bumblebees are threatened, monarch butterflies are threatened, and when you look at our subdivision where most people just have a flat patch of grass, you can see why we're being threatened. So I'd say that what joins the three of us over the ages of almost 1,000 years is the garden. And so the what is it, open-end or unresolved? Well, we don't know how this is going to end. It's been a continuous work in progress. So is this work ever going to end? I have no idea, because we keep generating new ideas and new concepts and new works of art and music surrounding this idea, but it doesn't sort of embrace the idea as a whole. So that's certainly a very unresolved aspect of our lives right now.
That's the one thing I think we have in common is we love gardening. I do too.
Yeah.
And it was Albert Einstein who said if the bees became extinct, he'd give the world 4 years. That means that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that is a very serious, very serious. I mean, I know I get made fun of Burlington with everybody, their green patch, and
Mhm.
I'm the last one to mow because I have a green bee in my lawn, and I don't want anybody to disturb it until I'm absolutely certain. And I mark it so I don't go over it. It's a beautiful emerald green bee. That's the bee of Ontario. But one area where I still really haven't continued is I was very influenced by Otto as a scientist. We both went up to dark sky country to astronomy. And to me, I still am fascinated by the cosmos, what we're seeing with the telescopes. First female astrophysicist, the the newest telescope. I mean, dealing with dark matter, dealing with what is it? And I've always sort of wanted to imagine just not only Kepler's sound of the atmosphere and the universe, but also the theory that you can see in color. My mother-in-law told me that she heard my music in different colors. And I thought that was very, very interesting. Scriabin had a color keyboard. But it's an area that I also think that if it's going to be music, I would love to have a visual component in there. So not quite Star Trek, but something like that, virtual. So you'd be in the audience and you would be in the space at the same time. I don't know how to do it yet, but I can imagine it. But yeah, I don't know how to do it yet. That's all. I can, if we have the right hall, not too many people in a circle facing out, then I think maybe that would work. I don't know yet. It's an area I'm very curious about.
It's so great to see that you have those unanswered questions, because those are what keep us going. So keep going, ladies. And the very last question, it brings us back to the very beginning of this event. If you look back, what advice would you give to young women composers entering the field today?
Okay, I'll take this one first.
Go for it.
My advice is learn from everybody. Don't even think about only music. Learn from artists you meet, go to concerts, go go looking and go for star festivals, look through telescopes. Um, oh, I've met so many interesting people, scientists, artists. I sat next to Jack Bush on an opening. I had no idea who he was. Ask a stupid question and he was very said, "Oh yes, well I used, painter's tape and a ruler." And then my artist friends like, but I didn't know. But not to be afraid. Go everywhere, ask. If you're studying counterpoint, study counterpoint, look at other possibilities. Work your teachers hard. That's what I think. And don't stop there. Learn from everything. Bread making. Uh, things rise. The whole theory of combinations of you add water, you add yeast, you add sugar, not too much salt, then it won't work. Understanding that can be brought into your music. Everything is possible. That's the way I went through. That's why my studying at university was not really as structured probably as it should have been, but my prof sort of, well, that's Elma. And they didn't hold me back. Even the humor part. Buczynski had a sense of humor. Look, John Wineswide wrote a piece on hockey. It and it's I remember watching him talking to Odu, he didn't want to talk to anybody else. He wanted to talk about science. He wanted to hear it from the guy who knows, and that's that kind of open-mindedness. That's what I tell the women. Don't accept the no, just keep going.
I think that's really great advice. I would, along the lines of say, well, just don't give up. I mean, being in a profession like the arts or music is hard enough.
Yeah.
You know, you really need a tremendous amount of persistence and belief in yourself. And going back to a theme we talked about earlier, which is networking, I think it's really, really important if you're an artist or composer, and I think especially if you're a woman artist or composer, to find that support group wherever you can find it. You know, don't feel you have to go it alone, but you know, and you might find the most amazing places. Like I say, I found a lot of my support in an Indigenous women's circle in Anishinaabe, Omama Winini Anishinaabe circle. You know, and those women are there for me, and they will probably always be there for me, and as well as the Estonian circle. But whoever you are, and whatever you feel your right circle is, you know, you need to have support. You need to have people who believe in. You need to believe in yourself, but it really helps to have other people believe in you as well. So I think that would and I like Elma's support is just to be curious, to just continue to be curious and to look at and as an artist, not only a female artist, but an artist and a musician is everything. The whole universe is going to contribute to you as the composer. So you need to open yourself up to that.
Wonderful. Suur aitäh. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are
Thank
so
you.
great, just amazing, ladies. Do any of you have questions? Kati, you can see if anyone asked the written questions in chat. We can take a couple of questions if you want to ask Kristi or Elma.
Were there any questions?
Looks like there's lots of to process.
I think we're all still processing, yes.
They are
If people want to,
processing.
there is a chat. If you feel more comfortable giving written questions, please feel free to use the chat part.
Yeah. I remember one when I was a composer in a young classroom. It was like composer in the classroom. One little boy asked me, you know, what do composers have for breakfast? Uh, I said, I actually remembered that. And I said, you know, this morning I had porridge. Oh, sort of like the secret to your composition is, you know, you have porridge.
I have to remember that one.
We thought I didn't know how to
Difference
answer
like
that.
oatmeal in the morning. Yeah.
What do composers eat for breakfast? And I said, porridge, but with butter in the middle and homemade jam, blueberry jam. I like more than 3 different spots. So just to be specific. I wasn't sure whether, you know, whether it would go any further, but it was the best question I'd had.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's no question, then again, suur aitäh.
Probably.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having us. I really enjoyed it. And
yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and we look forward to listen to your music. Maybe at some Estonian Music Week.
Let's hope
Thank
so.
you. I hope so.
Me too. Okay, thanks and
Okay.
good night.
Thanks again. Have a
Good
good night.
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.